Welcome to this guide on how to set up an Empyrion Galactic Survival dedicated server on Windows. This method will be using the SteamCMD, and you may have this situation where you would like to install Empyrion Galactic Survival, you want to run a server. Either this could be at home or it could be a rented server. So in this method, I'm going to tell you how to use SteamCMD. And the first thing you'll need to do then is, if we go and look into our folders and stuff here, all our directories, we need a location for our servers. So I'm just going to create a folder, a directory called servers. And in this, I will create another directory. And I'm going to call it Empyrion server. And if we open your web browser, we are going to need to download SteamCMD. So we'll go and have a look for that just now. If you want to download SteamCMD, it says here, download SteamCMD for Windows. This is on the Valve software website. I'll link it down in the description. So we'll download this. We'll save this to downloads. Then I'll just copy this to, I'm going to create a new folder for it. I'm going to call it SteamCMD. Control V, paste it there. So now that I've downloaded that, see if it works first. Yeah, just start SteamCMD and it starts updating. So this is what we want, so that's fine. Updating SteamCMD and stuff. The Empyrion Galactic Survival server, you can log in anonymously using SteamCMD to download the dedicated server files. So what we're going to do is create a script in our game folder. We're just going to create a batch file to do this, as it's probably the easiest way, because if we ever need to update our server, we can just click on the batch file and run it, and then it will update the server, which will be very useful. I'm just going to close it after this is updated. And now you see it, SteamCMD has updated and downloaded all the files. So if we go back into the Empyrion server folder, this is where we want our server to be. Our dedicated server files will be located in here. I'm going to create a new script. I'm just going to create a new file, new text document. It's not going to be a text document though. We're going to call it update server dot, I'm just going to name it .bat, because that's a batch file script which we're going to use. We'll be able to run our own command lines with this. Another thing I recommend you to do is open your web browser and search for Notepad++ download. And this is the website here. If you download Notepad++, I highly recommend doing this, especially when editing the configuration files for your server for Empyrion, because it's very let's say any spaces in it used by the normal Notepad, it would just not work very well. If the configuration file saves any spacing information in the configs, then it's probably most likely going to break your configuration. So we're just going to download Notepad+. Now, as this is Windows and 64-bit, I'm just going to use the installer. And I'm going to save that. Did I do this right? No, hold on a second. I forgot to open the browser in the right window. I apologize for that. This is the web link here, notepad++.org downloads. 64-bit installer. I'm going to save that and download it into my downloads folder. And then from there, I'm just going to open this and I'm going to install this Notepad++. Create a shortcut on the desktop, might as well. And it just runs it when you finish it. I'm going to close my web browser now. You'll see that this is Notepad++. So any editing we're going to do our editing into this thing here. So now that we created this .bat file, which is our batch file, right mouse click in it and we'll do edit with Notepad++. And then from here, we're going to create a little script that will use SteamCMD to download the game files, the dedicated game files. And it is also going to be used to upgrade our server, which will be very useful. So we're going to do something like this here. For our batch file, this echo off will just turn echo off. It means when you run it, you won't see all the commands that we're typing here in the actual console window. Now, this is our directory for our dedicated server files, so I'll just copy this here, the path name. It's going to change to C, and go into the root of C, and then we want it to just go into this directory here, which is going to be here, which is this directory here. Once it has done that, I did that wrong, hold on a second. We want to go into, this directory here for SteamCMD. And then it's going to run this here, steamcmd.exe. You can put .exe if you want. And then plus login. It's going to log in anonymously. It's going to do a force install to this directory here, which we need to change. The dedicated server files are going to download using SteamCMD. So we'll replace this path name here to the location where we want our dedicated server files to be downloaded to. Then we do plus app update, and this number here, that is basically a number which you can just find on Steam, and it's 530870, and that is the number for the Empyrion dedicated server files. So that's all you need for that, which is fine. I think this is all you need. You can change it however you like. I'm just going to save it. And then when I actually run this, it should start downloading all the dedicated files to this folder here. So we shall just watch that now. It's trying to log in anonymously. And here we go. It's got update state, reconfiguring progress. Looks like it's finished just now, which is great. And if you ever need to update this, all you need to do, if there's like a patch update or something, you can now just double click on the update, run the update server batch file script again. And if there is an update, it'll just update the server from here. If you want, you can like edit it again with Notepad+. And at the end of the line, if you put down something like pause, maybe null, I think it's pause null, it will pause the screen for you without a message. Try it again. Yeah, there we go. Success, app, the number, already up to date. And then you just press a key to close it again. So if you need to like insert a pause so you can see what it's doing, just put that line at the end of your script. So now that you've got all the dedicated files here, all your dedicated files for Empyrion are now inside this folder in this directory. So the next thing to do is change your configuration files. We're going to use Notepad++ for that as well. If you look at the CMD scripts here that come with the dedicated server, you'll have two, ones with no graphics and ones with the graphics, but it's just a terminal. I prefer this one because I want to see the terminal most of the times. And then if you do edit with Notepad++, you get to see what it does. And it says, it puts those command lines, start daddy with GFX. And you'll see the little notes. It writes there, the echo command just prints text on the screen and sets the timeout value of like 10 seconds. However, if you don't prefer that method, you can always use this one to start your server. This script here, which will start it without any console window, or console window, it just won't pop up. For this purpose, just so that you can see that the dedicated server does start properly, I'm just going to use this one in this tutorial so you can see the actual console. But first, by default, it uses this configuration file here called dedicated.yaml file. So what we're going to do is double click on that. We're going to open it in Notepad++. I do not recommend opening it in Notepad because you want to keep the configuration files intact without any spacing characters in it, or the server just won't start properly and come up with errors. So what I'm going to do is select my Notepad++ to open those types of files. So here we've got the configuration dedicated.yaml file open now. And this is your basic configuration here. You've got the server port, the default's 30,000. You can change that to whatever suits you, depending on where you're running it and what kind of server it is. You will need this port forwarded if you're running it at home on a router, or if you're renting a machine and you don't have any firewalls or stuff. That's the port, the default port it starts on. You can change it. Then your server name here, we can change it. For example, test server. No, wait. Oh, wait. And CPU on, for example, whatever, just whatever name you want to give it. Do you need a password? It depends. If you want this server to be a private server, then you must take out that. And then just enter your password here. Otherwise, if it's a public server, just keep that commented out. If you want to set the server max players, you can do that here too. For example, 128 players. I'm not sure if there's any hard limit, to be honest. And if you want, you can reserve play fields. Those things, these playfield servers held in reserve, basically, it's kind of like it preloads them. So when someone enters a playfield, it loads up faster. But the higher this number is, the more RAM usage it's going to be. Heavier RAM usage on your server, the higher that this number is. Which, depending on how much RAM your server has, the higher that can go. And if it doesn't have much RAM, you can leave it off, or you can just, you can turn it off completely, or you can just give it a number that's suitable for your machine. If you just go in a task manager, for example, when you're running the server and you go in a task manager, and then you look at the, I think it's the performance, let's see, performance. You can see how much memory something uses in the processes, how much memory they use, and that's how to keep an eye on it. Server public true, that I think that basically means it advertises your server on the list so that other players can see it when they're looking at the server list. And the other thing is you've got server description. If you uncomment that out, server description, keep those quotation marks. I think they're quotation marks. Server info can contain, it says. You can change this to however you want. For example, my server test URL HTTPS, and for example, my website or Discord link or something, mywebsite.com, link, visit, whatever you want there. There are all the other settings you can change. If you want telnet access, you can enable it here, telnet port and password. This is the Activate Easy Anti-Cheat EAC. I think you get it on some of the other games that I think are made by the same developer. So that can be enabled or false. Save game directory defaults to saves if you don't change it. Size class 10. This is depends basically what you want on the server, like blueprints, no limits, or whatever. Whatever you want. And blah 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 blah. You got all this. Another important part here, look. In game name, this is the name of the saved game files. It's going to start Daddy Game, for example. You'll see you can change this if you want it to be a different name. It's basically the folder name of your saved game progress, all the stuff that goes on in the server and the world. and the galaxy, the universe, gets saved into that folder. Mode is survival, that's the default. And then you've got a seed number. If you know what seed number you want, you can change it or just randomly enter a number. Custom scenario, default multiplayer. That is the default multiplayer basically. For example, if you were playing with a custom scenario like Reforged add-in, then you could change that to the Reforged add-in directory. Now, see where it says default multiplayer? If we go back into the directory of our server files, if we visit, as we go back into here, hold on a second, servers, Empyrion server content, and then we look into scenarios, and you should have the default multiplayer here. So when that says default multiplayer, it's going to choose this folder and load this scenario. If it was a Reforged add-in, you would change it to the Reforged add-in folder that you put here if it was a custom scenario. And since this is the default one that I'm going to use in the tutorial, we're going to save that configuration of the main server here. And you'll notice that in default multiplayer, each scenario also has an option, a configuration file here. If we look into that, you can change the game settings for single player or multiplayer. The one you want to change is the multiplayer survival. And then you can change all those settings, max structures, for example, 2000, 5000, all the other stuff like enable trading. You've got stuff like enable max block count, for example, false. Enable volume weight and CPU points. Auto miner depletion false. Grounded structure spawn false. Like basic settings you can completely change. Be very careful not to put any spaces, and be very careful not to have spelling error mistakes. I'm not sure, but sometimes even the capitalization might affect the server from running. I can't be too sure as I can't remember. Max spawn enemies. I don't really know what this means, but you can always leave a comment and tell me what it does. If it causes any CPU usage or RAM usage problems, if it's too high. Despawn escape pod, true, it cleans it up. If there's too many people joining and their escape pods are all over the place, that's a good option to set it to true, so they despawn. Regenerate POIs, if you want the POIs to regenerate, like if someone does a POI, it will regenerate. And I think there's other configuration files to change in the scenario, to change if you want to change other settings. It's there somewhere in the default multiplayer folder, subfolders. And I will leave it, I'll just leave it like that for now. You've also got those things you can change, but I don't want to go on too long for this tutorial, so I'm just going to save that, and I'm going to close and get to the part where you can actually start the server. Now, I'm hoping that the server will not display anything, because I wanted to, the reason I made this guide was to show you what happens when you start the server. So to start the server, after changing all the settings, we start the script Empyrion dedicated, no graphics, or this one where it says it could be, you shouldn't really use it. So I'm starting the server now. Should come up with a console window. Okay, here it is now. It's starting the server. And if you press, I think it's left, alt, enter, it goes into a window. And you can see Empyrion dedicated server starts in a console window. Now the reason I made this tutorial was because if you're using SteamCMD, don't know if anyone else mentioned this, but for people that get a blue screen with nothing on it, it doesn't give you an error. And people just don't know what is going on. People just don't know what's going on. And this is the reason I made this tutorial. This operating system's Windows Server 2019, it's a fresh install. Now, the reason you get a blue screen like this, I will show you, and how to fix it. We're just going to close the server, because it doesn't even start properly. I will give you a link down in the description. But if we go into open our web browser, and if we visit this link here, you actually need to install those Visual C++, I think they're libraries, dependencies. Let me just save this. It's a 64-bit version, and there's a 32-bit version. I'll just download those files. So I'm downloading those. I'm going to close the browser, and I'm going to go into open containing folder. So those two files I've just downloaded here, and basically you have to install them. I'm going to install the 64-bit version here. And here's what it is. Microsoft Visual C++ 2015 to 2019 redistributable. Can you see that? I don't think I can see what's over here, but if you read through that, basically agree to the terms and conditions, install. Setup successful. It must say setup successful. You might have to do a Windows update if it keeps failing. And then install the 32-bit version as well. I think you need them both. Agree, install. Successful. Once those two things have been installed, go back to your server and start it up again. And this time, you'll notice something different. If you run into that problem, you no longer run into that problem. It is now working, folks. And this is the reason I made this tutorial, because I think some people forget about this. And they just say, oh, what's happening? I mean, I keep getting a blue screen. So now you can see the console windows here. Empyrion dedicated server version, server name, game name, and daddy game. Now you see the daddy game, which I showed you earlier in the configuration file. Once you have actually started the server, in the saves directory, all your saved game information is going to be in here in games, and you see there's a folder now called daddy game. if you look into this again, at the bottom you've got game name DediGame. So if you were like, if you wanted to start the server fresh with a new game, you could like change that. If you wanted to go back to the old game, you just change it back to DediGame. So in the saves folder, you've got games, DediGame, and then all the saved information in the files here are all the files that the saved game data that from the actual world in your galaxy, from any players that do anything, all that stuff's going to be saved in here. You've got the sectors, content. More of it will be generated as people play. You should also get a players folder pop up once the first player joins into the game and creates their character. Well, you don't need to create character, but you know, I mean, join for the first time. So basically that's it. I hope this helps someone that has been trying to set up a server, especially when you get the blue screen, and at least you will know now how to fix that problem. And again, I'll include the links in the description. Please like the video if it helped, and if you want to play cooperatively on my server, then feel free to do so if it's still online. I'll also include a link down in the description. So have a great time. See you later.